Hi everyone, welcome to this run cycle tutorial. My name is Alex. The process of creating a run cycle is similar to creating a walk. There are two differences. The posing and the timing are different. The posing in a run is pushed, so the distance between the body parts in extreme poses is greater than in a walk. The timing is also quicker, so the tempo is snappier. Those are the only two differences between a run and a walk. A run is useful for getting the character from point A to point B quicker. Cinematically, a run is great for getting the viewer up close and into the action mode. A typical run cycle is 12 frames. I'll start with those 12, but will most likely end with a 14-frame run cycle. Those 2 extra frames help slow things down just enough so the action reads more clearly. I find in a run you get less personality than you do in a walk, mainly because you have half the frames to work with. If you have seen my walk cycle tutorial, you'll know how important personality is to a walk. I'll leave a link in the description to that tutorial. But despite having half the frames to work with, broadly speaking, there's only one purpose for a run, and that is determination. Maybe a character's trying to save someone, catch a bus, maybe trying to run away from someone. Generally, people run for a reason, and that's the kind of run I'm going to demonstrate, a run with purpose. I'm going to jump into Blender now so we can get started. For this run cycle tutorial, I'll be using this free Mario rig I got from Agora websites. I'll leave a link in the description to the rig. Really, the most important part is the posing. Once you have a nice pose, you mirror it. Now you have 2 poses, then you duplicate it to the end, and it just cycles between that same pose that you build. So we're going to spend quite a bit of time, 5 minutes, just on that one pose. Then we'll mirror it, like I said, and we'll just watch that animation. If it's playing well, we know we can continue. If we don't think it's playing well, I'll keep iterating on that pose until I'm happy with it. And then I'll move from there. I'll move forward from there. After that, the timing is going to be a 12 or 14 frame run cycle. We'll decide as we do it. So the timing is locked. That's what we'll stick to. But after the posing, I mirror it. And like I said, I watch the animation. Once I'm happy with it, I'll start working on one foot, just the contact. And I'll essentially do a first pass, a cleanup first pass on that one foot, making sure it's cycling pretty nicely. Then I'll copy those keys, mirror to the other foot. All of a sudden it looks pretty good. At this point, that COG, that center of gravity control, hasn't been moving up and down. We'll add that second, and that's when the run starts to take shape. Once I add the COG up and down, I'll go back to the foot and refine the foot, the contact, the knee popping. Then I'll duplicate it to the other foot, and then it starts to really take shape, the smoothness at least. Then from there I work up the spine, the rotation from the COG up to the spine. Then I'll do the shoulders and the arms, the timing, tighten the timing up, and lastly I'll do the head. So that's the process. So let's do that together right now. Okay, so first thing, go ahead and go to the animation workspace. In here, you're greeted to 3 panels. You got your left window, your right window, and you'll be greeted to your dope sheet here. I like to change it by hitting Control Tab. It takes us to our graph editor. And you got your timeline down here. I just pull it up. Let's set our frame range to 12 right now. We're not going to be using the panel, the properties panel here. I'll pull that to the side. For the windows, we have these buttons here. These just display different things in your scene. What I like to do is turn this one off. So then I'm only seeing the geometry. And then over here, if it's off, just go ahead and turn it on. I'm going to select the rig, Control Tab to get into pose mode. I'm going to hit A to select all the controls, and you can see the keys in the timeline and also in the graph editor. I'm going to go Control R, Control G, and we'll redo the pose together so you can see what I think when I do a pose. A to select all, X, and I'm just going to delete all those keys. The reason Mario looks like this and not what we expect him to. So up here we have shaded mode, we have a textured mode here. So if I were to play my animation now, you can see in the display, my frames per second is 15 frames. If this particular rig showed the textures and played the animation at 24 frames, I would keep it on texture mode, but it doesn't. So I just turn it to smooth shading here, and you can see that I'm getting 24, 25 frames per second. So that's important to know. Where you find that is in your options over here, and you can hit this text info. So we're ready to animate. We have our windows ready, Mario's in the scene, and we have our timing, our frame range set. So let's start posing together. In Blender we have this X mirror option over here. So I turn that on only at the beginning when I'm posing the finger, so I don't have to do the other hand. For this, I'm just going to select Mario's fingers, those top 4, and just deselect everything else. If you do Alt-Z, you can see through your mesh, just making sure I didn't select anything else. And one important thing, you'll see that I cycle between my move tool, my rotation tool, in a different way than I found most people to do that. And I just hit spacebar. You see G and R. And so that's all I do. I hit spacebar G, spacebar R. And that's how I jump between gizmos. So with those fingers selected, I'm just gonna curl them together and we're gonna create a fist. So there's my fingers, and it's the same on the other side. Also, I'd like to just start with those hands down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to turn this X mirroring off, hit A to select all, and on frame 1, I'm just going to set a key, I. And what I did there is I hit I, and it set a key on location rotation, but typically when you hit I, it brings up that menu and asks you what you want to key, and that bothers me. Here's how you get rid of that. You have to be in object mode. So you come in over here, go to object, animation, and change keying set. And then I set it to location rotation. So now when I key anything and I hit I, it always keys those things without asking. I have this initial kind of default pose. I just manipulated the fingers and brought the hands down. Now I'm going to start to do the extreme pose, the contact pose when that back foot pushes off the ground. And in a run, what's different from a run as compared to a walk, and we talked about it in the intro, really it's just posing and timing, but there is one other difference, and that is in a run, there is a portion of the run where both feet are off the ground. In a walk, at least one foot is always on the ground. Let's go ahead and go create that contact pose just as he's leaving the ground. So I'm going to pick this right leg here and push that back. And all I'm going to do is try to make it an aggressive pose, something that you saw just earlier as I had the scene open. You saw Mario really pushing off the ground, and I liked how that looked. I'm going to grab that COG and just rotate him forward as well. Cool, and let's bring him up. And what we're doing is just sculpting that first pose. Very rough, just getting the idea there. If we look at his feet, his left leg is forward, and in a run or a walk, whatever happens on the feet in terms of what leg is forward, it's the opposite for the hands and the chest. So his left leg is forward, that means his right hand is going to come forward. So I'm just going to grab that chest here and rotate it. So now it's opposite to what's happening on the bottom. And just being aggressive about the pose for now, not worrying too much about cleanliness. And the back arm and shoulder would go back. We're more worried about the idea at the beginning. Is it working? Is it reading well? And if it's a no, then you keep shaping it. And if the idea is starting to work, then you know you're on the right track. So here's a first pass of this pose. I'm going to select all, insert a key. And now what I'm going to do is go one frame over and refine the pose. So here's an idea, and what I like to do now is push this pose, compare it to what I've done already. Here's the update to the pose. I spent maybe another minute or two just updating things. So here's that original one we just did together, and you can see that just scrubbing through it, the pose is pushed a little more, and that's what I'm after. You can see there's a really nice line. I'm not worried still about the bend in the knee. I'll add that after, but it's much stronger here, and I like that. It feels like he's pushing off. I'm starting to get a little bit of silhouette, depending the angle, of course, between the arms. So yeah, I'm on the right track there. This is the process I do once there is a pose that I know is important. I'll iterate on that pose once, twice, 5 times, depending how important the pose is. But here's what I'm going to do now. So I know this pose that I just updated is stronger because it looks better. So I'm going to go back to this pose and delete it. It no longer is useful to me. And now I'll just move forward a few frames. We're just still working on the one pose. And frame 3 and frame 7 are the same pose. Frame 1 is that initial default pose. We just modified it a little bit. And now I can select these 2 keys, hit V, and just go automatic. What happens in the graph editor is by doing automatic, it overshoots. It's the same pose, but it overshoots because of that initial pose. So that overshoot is important to me because I'm now using the computer to push my pose, to elongate my pose, and just see if there's better appeal that the computer now is giving me. All I do is I scrub between it, and you can see how much more it pushed the pose. Here's that original. It's a little better. Already, I like, even if it's a little bit, I like that pose better. If I keep going, you can see how extreme it starts to get. And maybe it's too much, and you judge that. I like this frame because the shape in the arms are a little more exaggerated, and the feet is a little too much, but I'll pull those in. So I'm going to insert a key on that frame, copy that, Control C, and I'll just paste it back over here. I'm going to delete those keys, don't need them anymore. And again, now I'll just iterate on that pose. You see how important this one idea is, because in a run cycle, the run is so quick. Really, you're just trying to sell the attitude, the personality, but the attitude. And it's, for me, usually a run is a determination. So I loved seeing that angle on the body. And so that's why I spend a good 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes, if it's important, 20 minutes on a pose selling this idea. Now that I've liked the idea, I'm going to start cleaning maybe some of the controls that I've used. So that's what I'm going to do now, mainly in the foot. I don't want to hyperextend too much here. On this particular rig, there's this one control that I can start to pull down, this little hip control. And you can see it already cleans that up, and I like that. And you can see that this one contact pose, it's almost his foot's off the ground, but I'm not worried about that because you're almost sculpting every frame. There's only 12 frames to work with. So if you got up to this point, nice job, because it's not easy to pose. So hopefully what you saw gives you some ideas for your own animations. Okay, so we have this pose, A to select all. What we're going to do now is come to frame 13. I'm going to insert a key, and then frame 7, insert a key. In the graph editor, I can hit A, select all the keys, period, numpad, just frames frame. V, and I'm just going to set everything to vector. You could set it to clamped, and that's really ease in and out between those poses. And the reason for that is when I scrub between keyframes, and it's in linear, it's in vector, there's no warping of time or spacing between those keys. It's linear, so I find it's a little more accurate to what I'm gonna get, and then I can add, I can favor one pose or another. So from frame 1 all the way to frame 6 is the first half of your run. Frame 7 is the start of the second half of the run cycle. So from frame 7 to frame 12 is the next 6 frames of the run cycle. Frame 13 is a duplicate of frame 1, and that's how it just repeats and loops. So whenever you're working on a run cycle or a walk cycle, you can test your work to see if it's going to cycle properly just by going to frame 1 and frame 13. You can see right now the pose is the same because there's only one pose. If there's a difference, a movement, a change, you know that something is off with your cycle. So that's a very quick way to test it. Okay, so I'm just going to select one of the keys, doesn't matter which one, Control C, come to frame 7, and I have it as a hotkey, Q, paste flipped. So I'm going to undo that and show you where that is. So I just did Control C, and over here under key, you can come on over to paste flipped, and it just mirrors your pose. Getting here is very important. So we worked on the pose, we've talked about the timing, now we're going to play our animation. And here's what that looks like. Cool? So it doesn't look that impressive. But again, it's an important step to look at. Even at this stage, it's a little easier on a walk because the character's not angled. The character is up and down. But even at this stage, you can make modifications before you commit. Because once you start laying a whole bunch of keys, it's harder then to go back while there's more keys involved. So even over here, you can start to tweak your posing. And just move around your model, your animation, your character. And just see if you like what you're seeing. So what I'm going to do before I move forward, I'm going to add some rotation on the body. Right now there's nothing really. So I'm going to come to frame 1, and let's start adding a little bit of rotation on the COG and the chest, and just so we're seeing that already built in, and then we can always update that. I'm going to grab this and maybe just say 5 degrees. Cool. Insert a key, go back to the head, and -5. That's how simple that update is. Control C, go back over here, you saw that change. So that's how I know it's not going to fully cycle nicely. Control V. I'm going to come on over here and go paste flipped. Okay, Let's watch it now. So now there's a little more movement in that COG, a little more movement in everything because of that small rotation on the COG. Already that's going to help. Now what we're going to do is work on the feet. Once we start seeing that foot cycle, and then we paste it to the other side, and then we finally add that COG up and down, that's when the run cycle takes shape. So we're just going to worry about this back foot. On our walk cycle, it's easier because this other foot that's in the air normally would be on the ground, and it's much easier to think about. But in the case of the run, it's in the air. So we don't have a place that we know we're getting to right now. So it's a little more difficult, but that's okay. I'm going to select this one, and I know over this time period, all it's doing is getting into the air. So I'm gonna skip over this part for now and worry about the foot contact. So here the foot's in the air, and basically over 6 frames, it's got to get back down here. You can see how aggressive that is. And one of the nice things I like about working on a 12-frame run cycle is I like to work evenly spaced. So you can see I'm on frame 1. I can go to frame 3. That's 2 frames apart. Frame 5, 2 frames apart. Then frame 7, 2 frames apart. So I'm going to go to frame 9 and keep my spacing even. Alt-R, Alt-G, and it's going to reset the values of that control, and it's just going to set it back to what the default values are vector. So I know, and I'm going to just be aggressive about it, this foot needs to be back here by frame 13. So it cycles nicely. Let's just select this key with those 2 controls. All I have is this foot control and then that roll. Those 2 controls, G, I'm going to move it over 1. And frame 10 is really that contact foot, and then it goes back. And when it goes back, you want to make sure it's linear, it's vector. And so because when I block, everything is linear to begin with, it just makes it easier. And on frame 13, on a walk cycle, I would never rotate that foot control up. Only when it's in the air would I rotate it up. Normally, it's the heel control that lifts the foot. That's what I would rotate up. But here, to achieve that pose, I did this control, which just plays with that heel lifting. But I also rotated the foot control up to achieve this pose. So I'm going to go to frame 12 and basically reset the pose again. So I'm going to select those 2 keys, or pardon me, those 2 controls. Alt-R, Alt-G just resets your values, and I'm just going to pull it back and kind of eyeball it. Take this control, and this is my foot roll. There it is. In a run, you're sculpting a lot more things than you would in a walk cycle. Things are just more aggressive, and it depends on the run cycle. This one is a very pushed pose, and so the distance of the body parts are just further apart, so be aware of that. So all I'm doing in the second half is worrying about this foot contact. Really, there's only going to be 3 frames of foot contact for this whole run cycle. Frame 10, frame 11, frame 12. Frame 13 is already kind of starting to lift, but you could consider it. So 3 or 4 frames of foot contact on the ground. And really I'm working with these 3 frames here. Let's worry about the little arc here, and then we'll come back and clean this up. We'll copy the keys on this foot and then paste it to the other foot. Okay, so I'm going to come to frame 9. And frame 9 is this foot almost contacting the ground. I'm just going to select these 2 controls. I'm only working with these 2 foot controls, the main foot control and that heel control. Just reset the values, insert a key. And all I'm doing is posing the foot contact is almost about to hit the ground. Something like that. So he's about to contact, and then he contacts. And then here he's in the air. There I'm going to add a pose. Well, let's just do it now. You can see how quickly we can start to key every frame. Again, we're only working with 12 frames. And the foot in a walk and in a run is the most complicated. Cool, so you can see how we've sculpted that idea. We started with our key pose, mirrored it, and then we know we got to get into that foot extension again, so we just picked a frame and reset the values so it's on the ground. Slid it forward, then went 2 frames further down the timeline, reset the values again, and now we're just playing with that foot, how the distance that the foot is on the ground. And then we came back and sculpted these 2 in between poses. So let's worry about the first half here now. Same thing, let's go 2 frames. It makes the timing a little easier. And I find in a run cycle, especially a determined run cycle like this, that right as the foot's leaving the ground, it's nice to continue that foot extending back, and it just feels like you're really pushing off. And then I'll use these other 4 frames to get back into this pose, into this bent pose there. So we're on frame 3 now. I have this foot control selected, and I also like to reset the value of this one here. So if I come to frame 7, you can see on the graph editor that this curve right here gets reset. I like to do that over a shorter amount of time. So over these 2 frames, I'll already reset it. So it's just like that. I'm controlling when it resets, and I want to do it in a short distance. I might even do it over here, but it doesn't really matter. And then I'll pose it just with this foot. That's the preference that I like. So here's what we have. This foot's pushing off, and I want that toe to feel like it's still pushing. So I'm just going to rotate it back, and I'm going to pull it back. I'm not worried about the hyperextension yet. I'm going to fix that. What I'm worried about or thinking about is making sure that this foot feels like it's still pushing back or propelling us forward. So just posing that. And now I'm going to just pull it back a little more, and maybe it starts to come up. Insert a key. And then it's coming into that pose. And even this pose could probably already start pushing forward a bit more. And then down. You see, this is extreme. The foot, just look at the shape of the foot right there. On frame 7, it's here. Frame 8, it's there. That's pretty good. And then all of a sudden, frame 9, it's down there. The spacing between the placement of the foot over one frame is too big. And so that's why I say on this particular run, it's quite pushed. I'm starting with a 12 frame run cycle, and then I'm going to add 2 more frames, 1 frame on each side of the half of the run, just to slow it down. And that's where I'm going to slow it down, right in between there. And it's going to help not look so fast, not look so poppy. So just be aware of that. And when we do it, I'll explain it. I'm going to select the foot control and select our heel control there. That comes up, just those 2 controls. Perfect. We can test that it's cycling correctly, 13 and 1. You see there's no movement. I have those 2 controls selected, 1 and 1. I'm going to come in over here and hit A. That selects all the keyframes. Control C, perfect. Then select the same controls and in that order as well. I like to delete every keyframe except the first ones. So I'm going to go to frame 1 and we're going to paste flipped. And so sometimes this happens where the paste flip just doesn't work well. And here's what I like to do. I'm going to undo. I'm going to reset the values. It doesn't happen often that the paste flip doesn't work for me, but it happens sometimes. I'm going to retry it again. So I'm going to select the controls, both controls, Control C, coming over here. Perfect. There needs to be at least 1 key. And then let's paste flipped again. And this time it worked. So if it doesn't work, try resetting the values of the control you're pasting to. And then in rare cases, if that still doesn't work, try just copying one at a time and pasting it. So give that a try if you're having issues. And this is always fun just to see the legs or the hands doing the same thing. The left foot that I just pasted to, the 2 controls are still there. I'm going to select A, Control C, copy everything, and coming over here to frame 13. Remember, frame 1 and frame 13 are the same, so I'm going to paste over frame 13 because frame 1's the same. I had a comment on my walk cycle tutorial from Apathy, and he made a very good point that now when we have to shift the keys over, it might be hard to know exactly what frame you got to stop on. So basically, frame 7 is going to end up on frame 1, and this is his suggestion. Right click, and you can change the color. Change it to anything you want. Now it's visually different, so I'm going to select A, which selects all my keys, and you can see that this key is different. With everything selected, A again, I can hit G and move everything. And now I know when I reach that color, it needs to land on frame 1. Once it's on frame 1, everything is offset correctly. I can right click and just set everything so the color's the same. So very good point, thank you. And you can see what the feet look like now. Kind of looks a bit like a duck. But the feet are cycling pretty nicely, even with the hyperextension. Let's add the COG, and this run cycle is really going to start to take shape. How I'm playing my animation and going from panel to panel is they're just hotkeys, and I go over that in my beginner's tutorial, so if you're interested, check that out. Let's select the COG, and we're going to worry about the up and down now. So I always like to orient myself to the side that's pushing off. It's easier for me to understand that this leg is pushing off, and for those first few frames after that push off, basically Mario's pushing himself up. So that's how I know that the COG needs to go up, and then just around here, just before we go up again on the next half cycle, somewhere in here the COG needs to come down and Mario needs to take the weight. So let's go 2 frames, and all we're going to do is pull Mario up. Boop, just like that. Insert a key. So now he's pushing up, and now I'm going to go 2 frames over. We're going to pull Mario down, and we're going to pull Mario down just enough. You saw that knee bend right there. Perfect. That gives me a good idea that that's a good distance. Insert a key. I'm going to select these 2 frames, Control C, coming over here 2 frames over, and I'm going to paste flipped. Perfect. Let's play our animation. Cool. So it's a rough idea of that cadence, of the distance of the up and down. But already Mario is starting to take shape. So if you got to this point, really nice job. From this point it only gets easier, because we're going to refine the up and down of the COG, and then once we have the COG looking well, moving the way we want, everything else on the top half falls into place. The chest falls into place because of the timing of the COG. The hands, they're kind of a little different, but already the hands blocked are looking pretty good. And then the head falls into place based off the timing of the chest. So we'll spend a few minutes on the COG, just making sure we're happy with that timing. Once we're happy with the timing of the COG as well, we'll go back to the feet and do one more cleanup pass. Now that we have more information, we can refine and get rid of the hyperextensions. So sometimes I like to open this up, and you can see I have values. You can select those 3 and hit Shift H and then period numpad A to select all, period numpad to zoom in. So here's that up and down. That's what that looks like. This other 2 curves are pretty messy, and they're not even important. Really what that is the left and right and the forward and back. For some reason this rig, right now I'm in local space, so you can see I rotated Mario down, and the arrow is on a diagonal. But even if I go to my world orientation, you saw I just changed it. I'm in global. His gizmo didn't change, so if I could change that, yes, I would pull him straight up. You wouldn't see any of this mess here. So that's the case. I'm just going to delete these. I don't need them. You can see how easy that is. All I'm worried about is the up and down. So I'm going to come over here, Shift H. I'm only going to look at that curve, and we're just going to make this curve look good. You might find that at times your curve looks like this at the beginning and the end. And if they do, what I would do is select the 2 keys and together just rotate them. Because what's happening is this movement's coming up, and it's coming up at the end into that same direction. So that's how I make sure the cycle also continues smoothly. Cool. So we're pushing up. Now all I'm doing is looking at the up and down of the movement. And overall, I think the extremes meaning the very height of the run and the very bottom of the run, the extreme poses, I think are good. And now, if it was more, what it would do, it would make the head more unrecognizable, more movement. And one important thing to note is, so I'm building a determined run cycle. It's great because Mario's going to look good in a full body from any angle. But if I needed to then cut into a mid shot or a close-up on Mario while running and talking, I would just come to these curves and scale the values down just for that one close-up, and all of a sudden there's less movement and you can see his expression. So just know that that's how I deal with that. And for me at the bottom, I would still want to keep him down a little more before he explodes up. So I'm going to select these two keys because they're the same. Just going to make them auto clamp, and then I'm going to hit Control, deselect the key itself and the handle on both of the keys, leaving me just with the handle on the right side, G and X. And now I can pull it down, and you can see if you're looking up at Mario, he's just sliding further down. So I'm controlling basically him staying lower for longer. Now he's coming up, I like that. And down here, I want to be in the air longer. Same idea, deselect, deselect, G, X, and you can see he's up in the air longer. So all that is doing is the keys, the extremes stayed the same, but the spacing, the timing is snappier because I'm elongating the handles. Cool. And so I'm happy with that. And I got rid of Mario's side-to-side movement. If Mario, and I could go back and add it. If this was a heavier character, I would add it a little bit. But you'll see I'll do a little bit of rotation, and I find that looks good. Let's add a little bit of rotation on the X, just forward a little bit, and then the COG is done. Let's select our rotate X, Shift H. All we're going to do is look at this one value, this one curve. And same thing, I start right back at the beginning because it's easier for me to understand. Mario just pushed off, and he's going to open himself up. Really, as he's coming down, he's opening himself up. When he comes down, and we're just going to create that drag. And so as he's pushing up, really the drag starts to come down. It's more noticeable in the head, but we'll do it in the COG a little bit as well. Frame 5, I'm going to rotate him up. So G, and just find which way is up. So it's the other way. Cool. And you can see what's happening to the body. It's just rotating up. I'll make it more noticeable again. So I'm building that drag as the COG goes down, there's drag on the body rotating up, and then when he lands, the rotation goes back down, and then the cycle is the same. Awesome. So here's what we have so far. We've cleaned up the COG, and we have the foot going. The top half is still stiff because we haven't done anything really there. Let's go back, clean up the feet, and then we'll go and work on the chest. So I like to start back with the same foot I was looking at. And now what we're looking at is cleaning up some of the arcs. Overall, I think it's looking pretty good. And then the hyperextension. And at this point too, we can decide if we wanted to add those extra frames. I think it's actually working on just as is. Here's what I was talking about before. If I select all the controls, hit A, select all, here's what we have so far. Frame 13 is the last frame, so I'm just going to key that. Everything else here, we just don't need. That was the foot control that we pasted. Go to frame 1, I'm just going to insert a key, make sure everything's keyed, and I'm going to delete these keyframes. Frame 1 and 13 I can check, you can see they're the same, so the mirroring is looking good. So let's play this updated timing. And you can see the end is held a little longer, and those 2 extra frames actually help see the run cycle a bit longer. We just have to clean up that little gap that we created. So yeah, I'll stick with the 14 frames. Frame by frame now, I'm just pulling this one control down so there's a little bit of bend in that knee. So all I'm doing is now making this one leg as clean as possible. Looking at the spacing, the arcs, and then frame 12 we can have a bigger change. Right in here, kind of held up a little longer. And then still a bit of a knee bend. Like he's building that power and then he's going to explode down. And I hope you can see by this process too, we're trying to work broadly. And we did the foot, pasted it to the other side, mirrored it. Then we added the COG and then cleaned some stuff up there. Now we're going back and cleaning the foot and adding the detail, instead of posing it with the detail. And I think you get lost that way. Just pose it roughly, but pose it so the idea is reading. Okay, I think we've cleaned up the 1 foot. I'm just going to play it. And I'm just trying to concentrate on the foot closest to the camera. And I'm just looking at the cycling. I think it's looking pretty smooth. So I like it. And so I'm going to select the foot. I'm going to select the heel. I'm going to select that hip control that allows me to play with or get rid of the hyperextension. And I'm also going to then select the toe control. Those 4 controls now are what is animated to make his foot look smooth. Cool, so I have those 4 selected. I'm going to insert a key and insert a key. Just make sure everything is keyed nicely. Let's test that everything is looking good, and now it is. I'm going to hit A, Control C, every key is selected. And I'm going to come over to the other side now. Select in that same order. I think it makes a difference. I haven't tried it, but I'm used to doing it in the same order. Foot, heel, then I did that hip control here, and then I did the toe here. Okay. Come to frame 1. I don't need any of these. X. I'm going to insert a key, make sure everything's keyed, and then we're going to paste flipped. So I have it on a hotkey, but again, you can come on over to key and paste flipped. Perfect. This time it worked. So before it didn't, I wasn't sure why, but I showed you a workaround. This time with everything selected, it works. Again, you can play it and have some fun and just see him running in a funny way. With everything selected, I'm going to hit A, Control C, and paste over it. Perfect. This time we had frame 7 because it was a 12 frame run cycle. Now we've updated the timing. It's now a 14 frame run cycle, so the middle is 8 frames. I'm going to select this keyframe. I'm going to right click, coming over here to keyframe type, and just pick a color. Last time we did this extreme, I'll just say green for this jitter. It doesn't matter. A, select all. What we're after is just making it visually different. We know that this key needs to end up on frame 1 for the foot then to cycle properly. So everything selected, A and G, and we're going to move to the left until that green key is back at frame 1. Right click, keyframe type, keyframe. Now the key's back to the same color. So let's play what we have. So now both feet are cycling nicely, and it's working with the COG. And it's starting to take shape. It's a good looking run cycle. Let's select the chest, and now we'll worry about that. What we're gonna add, all this is right now is a little side to side movement. For the chest, we're gonna keep the side to side movement. We're gonna rotate up and down and translate up and down too. So I'm gonna select all, and I'm just gonna make things auto clamped. He'll come from more of a compressed pose as he's pushing off, and then once he gets to the very top, things open up, and as he starts to come down, things really open up. Frame 5 or frame 6 is a good place to just add some drag on the body. I'm going to go to frame 6. So all I'm going to do is pull it up, that's it, and rotate this way. That's the drag. So here's what we have with the updated chest. Just a little more organic, breaking things up a little bit. Let's work now on the shoulders and the arms, and that's really going to help break things up. And then we'll work on the head. You can see how the head's stiff. We'll break that up as well. Let's select the shoulder, the upper arm, the elbow, and the wrist. Everything selected, A, and I'm going to make things auto clamp. Perfect. Come on over here to the shoulder, and I'm going to go 2 frames over, and what we're going to do is just add some drag on the shoulder. So I'm going to physically pull it in the direction it was coming from, and by pulling it and rotating it, we're making things separated, feel organic. So we're creating drag. As that chest is rotating, as it's rotating back, we're pulling that shoulder forward and creating the drag. So we're just posing it. And as they swing back forward, again, I'll just go maybe 2-3 frames, we'll decide, and delay it. That's the drag there. Don't be afraid to translate things as well. Okay, and then here I'm going to add another breakdown, pulling it down and back. Cool. And then it swings back into the same pose as frame 1. And so just with doing it on the shoulder, this arm is much more determined, much more aggressive. It's basically what it's doing, it's favoring the extreme poses, and it's staying there longer, and everything in between is snappier. It's more cartoony, so be aware of that. I'm going to select the upper arm now, and we're going to do the same thing. We went 2 frames with the shoulder, now we can go maybe 3 frames with the upper arm, and we'll add even more drag, and then with the elbow we'll go 5 frames, or 4 frames. We'll bump it even an extra frame, so everything starts to bend, and just show a little bit of overlap by doing that. But same idea as the shoulder, it's just being delayed a little bit. The general shape has been set. I'm not going to deviate much from that, but we're favoring the one idea, the one pose longer. And as it's swinging through the body, I'm going to now with this control, just tuck it closer to the body. It's coming into that back pose here, and maybe it's too high. So I'm going to pull it down so I have somewhere to go. I'm going to go 3 frames and then still pull it up. You can see now the delay that I'm building into it. Delay the elbow. So I'm on the elbow now, and I'm going to delay it. Cool. I'm going to copy, Control C. It's got to be the same, beginning and end. And for the upper arm, we went 3 frames. Now I'm going to go 4 frames. And it's really bending. I'm just trying to build, really just trying to show the organic overlap. Yeah, and I could see it. I could see it starting to bend there, so that's great. Big bend here. We're coming out of it here, and now maybe frame 12. I'm almost going to make it straight. A little bend. Let's see what that looks like. All right, so here's what that elbow looks like. And you can feel the bend. So it's starting to look good. And if I compare it to the other side, everything is just a little more stiff. If I come in over here, timing is more aggressive, but the elbow is starting to bend. So that's looking good. And now I'm going to paste flipped. Perfect. So that's what that looks like without offset. Let's add the offset. So just like we did with the legs, paste it and move it until that blue key is on frame 1. Right click, keyframe type, go back to keyframe. Yeah, run cycle is nice and aggressive. We're really close to being done the cycle now. Cool, select the head and A to select all, period numpad, and so there's our curve. And let's go ahead and do a little bit of drag, just like we've done with the chest. A little drag as the body comes down, the chin's going to go up. And we might even translate that head up. And really that's all that's needed. So we're coming up. And as we come down, the head can be delayed up. And then on frame 8, frame 1, and 15, I'm going to pull that head back down a bit. So over here, I'm just going to pull it up a little bit. Not much. But you can see the delay that's being added. And chin up a little bit. Insert a key. Control C, come on over, because this is 2 frames from the end of the half of the cycle. 2 frames here, 1, 2, and paste, flipped, perfect. That head just goes up, and so that's the drag, and it comes back down. Awesome, so here it's coming back down, and then it's going to go back into this pose that we pulled up. So here, I'm going to push the head down into the body, and a little bit of drag on the nose as well. Insert a key. Control C. Coming over here to the end and paste flipped. Control C and Control V. Okay, and there's our run cycle. So if you got to this point, really nice job. It's not an easy thing to build a seamless run cycle that doesn't pop, that cycles nicely. So it's not an easy thing to do, so give it a couple tries. If you're new to this, give it a try. Know that it's rough. Come back a couple days from now, or from your first try, and try it again. And just go through the different steps. Okay, I'm going to give this a quick render, and then this tutorial is done. So I'll be back in just a second. Here's the final animated run. I hope you liked the tutorial and got value from it. If you did, please like the video so that I know this content is helpful. Focus on your posing, and everything else will start to fall in line. Good luck. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.